Yes, guys, record rainfalls lead to floods, such as what we've seen at the beginning of this video in Paris. And, record snowfalls are going to lead to avalanches in and around those regions. And that's not all. Crops are inevitably going to be affected as the migration of this pole continues. And it is down to the magnetic poles and the reversal that is taking place that all these weather anomalies are in flux at the moment. It is a direct result. Adding to this, a grand solar minimum doesn't help. But the two coincide with each other. Both spell colder climates for this planet. And it should come as no surprise to all of you guys out there that the reason why the coldest regions on this Earth are in the same place over the Arctic and Antarctic where the magnetic poles lie. And that is because the magnetic poles on this planet regulate the cold and extreme temperatures in these regions. And when the poles migrate, so does those cold regions migrate, and that's why we're seeing record temperatures in Siberia. And that's because the poles are heading towards Siberia right now, as we speak. Yes, very slowly and gradually, but nevertheless, it is a movement. And as a result, we're going to see more and more of these extremes as time goes on from this point. The poles have migrated, even though the TriMag data doesn't really, scream it out loud and clear. But like I said, when I go through the data, I can see that 11 degrees is coming up more now than it ever has done. And it won't be long before it is primarily 11 degrees. And that will indicate 1 degree shift in the magnetic North Pole again. That's around about 47 miles when I calculate it from the UK here to the migrational line, which is going towards Siberia. And yes, I know some people have asked if I can show you the pinouts on that. Well, I'm going to do that soon. But I'd rather, give a pin to the map showing a little bit of difference or migration. So it isn't going to be long now before we put the pin in and we see how far it's migrated across the northern hemisphere. But these changes are going to continue, and guys, you can spot this in your regions that you're at because of the warm period that we experienced in the 80s and 90s. People were importing tree seeds and trees from other countries because the temperature in that region now had changed to suit those trees from other regions of the planet. And you can check whether climate's changing in your region by the trees that shouldn't be there naturally, that have only been able to thrive in these regions because of the warmer climate that we've experienced over the 80s and 90s. Well, we can see that at least from 2007 there has been some dramatic changes. We're seeing slow rebounds of the ice caps in the northern and southern hemisphere, as well as the migration of the magnetic pole shifting, and as a result, the fracturing of the polar jet streams in these regions now that intermingle regularly with subtropical jet streams. When you get hot and cold air mixing, you're going to get, the sort of weather patterns that we're seeing, where they deliver flash floods over Europe, Southern America, Mid-America, and so on. There is, guys, an unstoppable locomotive train coming, and we're on the track. And inevitably it is going to reach us. And that's the analogy that we're faced with. All these things are going to start catching up with us at some point. And there is a lot of things. I've said this, if we just had a gauntlet and each obstacle was one of these problems, eventually we are going to find ourselves unable to avoid the obstacles. We've been doing a good job for the last 10-15 years on this planet. And, just across the range, we're going to find ourselves hitting at some point one of these obstacles. It's going to trip us up for the next one. We're going to start hitting them all once that starts to happen. And these false environments that we participate in each day, these cities, are going to become uninhabitable for the amounts of people that are in them, because they are artificial environments, meaning that they don't sustain the amount of people naturally that live in them. If you just take, the capitals around the world, for instance, and the occupations and the occupants in these capitals, and when things start to fall apart, you can just imagine what is going to take place in these areas. And if you can't envision that, start looking at, for a good example, some of these recent regions of the planet where they've been war-torn, engaged in, war, which has dismantled the infrastructure of societies. And you'll probably get a good idea as to what you'll be looking at. And the only thing is, it won't be yourselves that, contribute to the situation at the time, such as in wars. It will be nature that is throwing these obstacles up for us. So, our cities have been fed by ourselves and technology what has been required to sustain the people within these regions, and at some point it's going to be no longer able, because of the effort that's going to be required eventually to keep things going in these regions. It's going to be impossible to achieve. I mean, that will be something felt this morning by those people in Paris with the floods that are taking place. You imagine your living room being overwhelmed by water up to the ceilings. What power have you got to stop such things happening? These things are going to continue to escalate, and it's not just sea surface temperatures, and it's the dynamics of all the climate on this planet changing at the same time, and are going to continue in that trend to change over time from now on. And why I keep trying to bring it across to you guys, the importance of this is that you probably are able to put yourselves in situations in the future where you can possibly avoid these things. If you live in areas that are vulnerable to floods, then you can put yourself in a position of whatever region you live in where it's not prone to floods. But it's not just that. I mean, the nurseries of our fishery stocks are changing because of sea surface temperature maps like this. When things like this change, it's not just the vegetation on the land that changes. Trees that aren't supposed to be in the regions because the region recently changed the climate, which made it favourable, and now it's swinging back in the other direction, making it less favourable. It'll be everything. It'll be fish stock, which is heavily relied on in some parts of this world. It'll be rice, grains, all those staples. The dynamics of the planet are changing. It's easy for us all to just, put these aside. You'll probably watch this video, have a coffee, then have a meal with your family, and before you know it, this topic and subject will have, gone from your train of thoughts. And that is probably the case for 99% of the people on this planet. We are easily distracted by this modern life. The phone could ring and there's your attention gone. It's not just the sea that is changing, with temperature. It's not just the total precipitation of the world's water stocks in the atmosphere that is changing. This planet's temperature is changing, and it will affect nature on every diversity. And this is the sort of thing that in nature regulates population of whatever species. The amount of food that a specific species relies on, regardless of whether you're human or not. I mean, we're at the top of that food chain because simply we eat everything else below it. But for some species, it is becoming difficult within its ecosystem to sustain and thrive as it has done, because the dynamics of climate have changed and therefore made it harder for it to get its food, and there's a natural limitation on population expansion with that species. It shrinks, and in some cases, to the point where extinction for that species becomes inevitable. It's not just certain animals that become extinct, it's vegetation as well. Some things in the rainforests that have lost the canopies and its natural environment as became extinct, possibly even before it was even discovered by science and announced as a new species. Which is a shame, because we don't know what future benefits could have been gained, even biologically and pharmaceutically, for ourselves. Had we have found that species, we might have lost a miracle cure for ourselves. But that window will have closed. And, it's not just it's not just us that are having effects on our own environment. Now the environment is having an effect on us. It's come about in a full circle. Guys, we don't live in a logical society. If we did, things would be conducted very differently now. If I had £1 for every time somebody said to me, if you want to earn money, you better put your conscience in a closet. And you know what's going on there, don't you? People know that they should be doing things or conducting themselves in a better manner, but if they did, they wouldn't earn money. And this is very common these days for people to have that attitude. We are intelligent. We are an intelligent species, but we don't use the logic, which would be beneficial to us. And just off the top of my head, I'll give you a good example. Yourself, if you live in a city, on the morning everybody's trying to get to work and you're stuck in traffic for half hour. You're thinking to yourself, only if companies used a little bit more common sense, and schools as well, because that seems to be the majority of the traffic in the morning. People going to schools, taking their children to schools, or going to work. That 9 o'clock, 8 till 9 o'clock, and then 4 o'clock on the afternoon till 6 o'clock, the rush hour traffic. If only companies, got together and said, we're going to start at 8, we're going to start at 9, and we're going to start at 10. You could spread the traffic over those 3 hours a little bit better than what it is now, and the traffic would move a lot easier, as opposed to right now, the way things are. In every country, it's a problem in every country. Everybody's trying to get to work at the same time. So the roads are being pushed, to the maximum capacity. It just doesn't make sense to, or any logical sense to go about your business like that. All the resources that we need are on this planet, regardless of what continent those resources come from. If we pulled together as a planet and as a species, because we are a single species, yet there are some differences in ethnicity, colour and diversity, yet we are all the same species. If we work together, can you imagine where we would be now? Would we need to waste the trillions of pounds and dollars and euros on the military hardware that we do? You imagine, just for an instance, we spent here in the UK £4 billion on an aircraft carrier, the Queen Elizabeth class, and we've built 2 of those. Let alone the submarines that need to be maintained, at the tone of probably more billions. It's just, where could this money be better spent than on, defence from our own kind? It's crazy when you think about it. But there's money in military hardware, and for that reason, people don't want to be out of business. And everyone loves in business nothing like a military contract. to secure them for the next 5 years. We've got to change the way we do business on a lot of scales, and I only feel that we're not going to ever be able to have that opportunity to do it, because before long things are going to change to the point where a lot of this infrastructure we enjoy today is going to disappear. And I have a feeling that this has happened a few times already to our species on this planet. I do believe that there was technology, probably higher technology than what we have today, for the simple fact that that there was on this earth thousands of years ago cultures, communities of people that were able to lift 600-ton blocks in one piece out of quarries. And we struggle to have equipment that can lift such a thing in one piece out of quarries today. I don't think we even have that technology. And it bewilders me when I hear these historians that study these cultures claim that they used diorite balls to hammer the shapes that they did, in some of the hardest materials known on this planet. It just doesn't make any sense, because the finish on these are not what you would expect by beating a stone against another stone or on granite. The surface finish is perfect. Perfect right angles, perfectly flat, smooth surfaces in granite. And if you do your research, you'll find that not only were they able to get these surfaces and cut these objects and lift them out of the quarries, but they was also able to drill horizontally into this granite and at the same time change the direction of the drill bit whilst it's inside the block, in a similar fashion to how we drill today for oil, directional drill bits. So how did they have this technology? How did they have this ability to do this if they wasn't at some point highly technologically advanced? The problem is with these historians is that they just haven't found any circuitry or technological equipment that would demonstrate that ability. And I've explained why you're not going to find it, because if you take some of the highest technological advanced equipment that we've got today, such as laptops, iPhones and stuff like that, and just leave it in the elements will break these components down faster than they would copper and steel chisels, simply because the circuitry in this modern technology is so fine, it's thinner than strands of hair. And how long would that last? You've seen it when you've seen a nail in the elements, which is a good 3 or 4 mil nail, almost rotten in the centre because it's been left out in the rain and the elements over a short period of time. So, you just know this technology wouldn't have lasted. Some of the things that have lasted have been those that have carved in stone, and that should stand as testament to anyone here today, that if you're going to leave anything behind for future civilizations, then you better leave it in stone, because that's the only thing that's going to last. And here we see these great monuments such as the pyramids, which seem to be scattered all over the world, and some of them not even talked about, such as the pyramids in Bosnia, let alone those ones that I showed in the last video in Antarctic. These are going to be the only things that are going to survive to show that there were great civilizations before our own. It might come about one day that they will admit the fact that these pyramids were built in such a manner and perfection that they could have only been achieved with a certain level of technology. But at the moment they're not going to admit that. And right now, we have other things on our minds, as to working out where and how they were created thousands of years ago, because we're going to go through another, in my view, period of time which is going to subdue us back into some form of amnesia, and we're going to forget. And the reason why we're going to forget is because we're going to be too concentrating on survival. And just put this into perspective just before I end this video here, guys. 7 billion people on the planet. Less than 1% understand what's going on this planet. And it is very convenient that mainstream isn't really revealing the stories that need to be told. And if you just do a little bit of research out there, you're going to find out what sort of state this planet's in and where it's heading in the not too distant future. And where are we going to meet the food requirements for the 7 billion when the northern hemisphere of this planet is unable to produce crops for them? Where are we going to meet the food demand when only the equatorial regions on this planet are going to be able to provide those fertile growing grounds? And then we're going to have to deal with still the dramatic changes from year on and year out of different climate patterns, meaning what grew 2 years ago in one climate won't be growing at this point in time, and then it will change. We're going to have some form, if we're going to make it. We're going to have some logistical marvels in place, which are not in place right now, to shift this food that can be grown around the world so that the inhabitants of this planet can get their hands on it. And I just fear that, as things become short, the weaker parts of the cultures and civilizations and communities are going to be the ones that take the brunt of it first, which means if you haven't got the funds to purchase what you need, then, and you certainly won't have the means to grow your own, then the inevitable is going to happen for you and your units. I've been giving thought to these communities that are preparing for such events. There are only a few of them. I know you'll hear them talked about a lot, but there are a few of them, and I bet the majority of you guys are not even part of one of these communities yourself. But even these communities probably have got the wrong idea of how to survive such events and where the abundance of food is going to be at those particular points in time. Me, I'm just going to probably locate myself closest to where I know there's an abundance of food regularly, and I'm going to make sure I've got the skills to obtain that, and that's going to be a coastal region. Because you might be lucky to forage other foods, but you're going to probably stand more chance being a dab hand at catching fish of some sorts, which is going to sustain you and yours. And I can't see any other way around it. I'm thinking more along the lines of, if we're going to stay in our situation in the northern hemisphere, then we're going to have to adapt to the climate that's coming, which is very likely a cooler climate, maybe a glacial period. And the only people that survive such things like that are going to be Eskimos with the skills that they've got. Because I can just see a stampede of people, if it goes to the worst extremes, making a beeline down to the equatorial regions. And can you imagine 7 billion people descending on some of these regions for food? I think most of their energy and efforts will be to no prevail. You're better off just trying to adapt to your climate, as opposed to migrating to a more favourable climate for the food, because I think that is exactly what everybody's going to do. And I think if you keep your footprint And in them times, if they ever come to a small footprint size, you're probably going to just disappear in the background of nature, and no one's going to probably take much notice of you. That's if it does go to those extremes. You know, we can hope and pray that our governments have got a backup plan, and a backup plan for that backup plan. But one thing will be certain, I think, is that they won't probably even have an idea of the extent of how bad things could possibly get, and for what long periods of times they could get. You see, most of us aren't thinking about these things, are we? During our breakfast, dinner and tea with our little families. You know, when we're at work, we're distracted from these thoughts, and when we're back home, we're just consumed with thoughts of keeping the roof over our heads now, aren't we, guys? But we are all in the same boat, and we are all definitely going to face the same problems ahead of us. So I'm going to leave you with those things, guys, to think about. What can I say, guys? It would be great if we could have a bit more support for the channel. The link's down there if you want to do that. And if you haven't already, pop over to the website. You know, there's a lot of geo data now being placed on there. poleshiftnews.com is what you want to put in if you want to find the website. And on there we've got live solar data, magnetometer data. We've got weather maps, sea ice extent, earthquakes, volcanoes, you name it. It's all on that one website. And let's not forget, we're also tracking the progression of the magnetic migration real time. It records a data set every 3 seconds, guys, and there's nothing else out there like it. It is tracking only the heading, and soon, you know, we're going to have something else come online, which is the weakening field data collected from the magnetometer that we're building at the moment. So if you want to support the channel, website and the research, links down there. And as always, guys, enjoy your weekend. Bye for now.